Hello there. So my name is Mary Effler. I'm 25 years old. I'm originally from Dallas, Texas, and I'm an assistant language teacher with the Interact company in Yokosuka City of Kanagawa Prefecture in Japan. So I've lived in Japan now for about 2.5 years. I've been working as an ALT, assistant language teacher, this whole time. I originally came over with the JET program, where I taught in high schools in Fukushima Prefecture, and just recently, this past summer, I switched to working in elementary schools with the Interact company. The transition culturally wasn't very hard at all, but I've been interested in Japanese culture since I was about 10 years old or so. I got started watching anime, and then I started doing some research on the internet, and then from there, my interest in all sorts of Japanese culture just grew. So culturally, there wasn't very much to know since I'd had about 13 years to study in that field. Socially, the transition was a little bit difficult because the way I talk and the way I communicate with people is typically very sarcastic, very lighthearted, that sort of joking relationship. But Japanese people don't really communicate that way. Like, for me, it's sort of a sign of friendship and trust. Like, if I can be sarcastic with you, like, it's my way of expressing that we're on a good level. But that's completely not how people communicate here, by and large. Also, sort of a shift to have my coworkers be much older than I was. On average now, my coworkers are about 10 years older than me. So that sort of relationship is a little different to work with, and I get seen as immature sometimes purely because of my age, which isn't necessarily true, but it's that sort of image that I have to find a way to get over. I do think the change was very worth it, in the regard that there's just a lot to be learned by living in a foreign country and actually experiencing life there. I mean, obviously, there's a good amount of experiences you can get being a tourist and just going to visit different countries for a short time, but I think the experience of actually having to go through like the mundane details of day-to-day life in a foreign country, I think that is a wonderfully enriching experience, and it gives you some things to appreciate and some things that you can notice could be improved in your own home country. And so if and when you choose to go back to where you're from, you have new ways of looking at life and new ways to improve upon your life when you do go back. So I think, especially for me personally, I think this experience was very worth it. As far as getting employed, I don't think it's very hard at all. Especially with this job, there's a variety of different companies, different schools, different options you have. So if you're a foreigner who really likes teaching English and you're good with kids, I think you'll have absolutely no problem finding a job here. Like I said, I originally came over with JET, which is the hardest of all of the options to get into. At least for for JETs coming from America, it's about an 11% acceptance rate. So I got accepted on my second try in, but it really wasn't that hard, all things considered. And then this last summer when I switched jobs to working with Interact, I originally put out my resume on a couple of different sites online, and I also directly applied to a couple of international preschools and other private schools, as well as some places called eikaiwas. They're English conversation schools that are like after-school programs. But within 2 days, I had 7 interview offers with these different companies, so it wasn't a challenge at all. For me, I don't find teaching very difficult at all. I've always had an interest and been fairly good at teaching people just about anything, from computers to jewelry and arts and crafts, and then teaching English. Obviously it's a slightly different realm than teaching those things, but I think if you're very skilled in the subject that you're teaching, and if you have a genuine passion for the subject, and if you relate well to other people, I think it's very easy to become a teacher. Especially here, several of the companies have good training programs, and they'll give you the skills that you need to be able to be a good teacher. And I think so long as you keep the goal, like to make sure that the students have a good time and to make sure that they're experiencing the language in as genuine and engaging a way as possible, I think that being a teacher is a pretty easy job, at least in this sense. You know, I think that so long as you make sure that your main focus is to give the students the most engaging, genuine experience possible, I don't think teaching is a difficult job in that regard. Salary for this job will vary depending on where you live in the country and the company that you work for. Some pay more than others. The English conversation schools, kawaiijutsu, especially tend to like to cut corners and pay people less as much as they can. For the JET program, they have a flat rate salary across the nation. All teachers will make 300,000 yen a month, which is roughly 3,000 US dollars. And then you have to pay health insurance and pension, are nationally required for all residents of Japan. So after you pay those, you've got about $2,600 left to pay your rent and anything else. See, for Interac, I make about 2,400 US dollars a month. Other companies typically range in paying somewhere between 2,000 to 2,500 a month. For my monthly spending, I pay about $50 for health insurance. It's the national required universal health care. I also pay about $150 into pension, which you can look at as kind of the equivalent of Social Security here. And then I've also got some other, like national employment taxes, that sort of thing. So, and then I pay about $400 a month for rent. So after all that's said and done, I've got roughly $1,800 with which to pay like my electric bill, my cell phone bill, food, any of that stuff. So I actually find it pretty easy to save money and to also be able to, have a fairly decent life living over here. Obviously, I'm not about to become a millionaire or anything, but, I don't have any sort of money problems whatsoever. As far as pursuing this, like I said before, I've always had an interest in Japanese culture and in the Japanese way of life. So that's why I chose Japan as the country to teach at, as opposed to China, Korea, France, Germany, any of those. Also, my original focus, I'd started my master's program in emerging media and communication at UT Dallas. My goal was to try to learn how to best teach foreign languages online. I've actually since started doing that. I have a YouTube channel that I do that on. So after a year in that program, I decided that I wanted the actual hands-on experience of teaching in a classroom so that I could then see what methods worked really well in the classroom and then try to think from there the best ways to bring those methods to the internet. So I chose that I wanted to try to become a teacher, and because it takes time and money to get your teaching certification in America, it's very, very easy to become a teaching assistant in Japan. It doesn't take much time at all, and you don't have to go through and get extra certifications. So this job seemed pretty perfect for what I wanted to do. The physical benefits of this job, obviously I get paid, so that's pretty nice. Let's see, I also, because my job is that of a teaching assistant and not a full teacher, I have a lot of downtime during the day. Basically, if I'm not actively teaching a class, I'm free to do whatever I want. By Interac rules, I can actually just leave the school and then come back the next time I'm actually scheduled to be doing something. So I've got a lot of time to work on my other hobbies at my desk. I've recently taken up crochet, which I can work on at my desk. I do illustration work, so I can play with my Copics and stuff at my desk. I also do a lot of gymnastics and circus acrobatics, so I can go into my English classroom, which is this room, and just practice stretching and whatever on the floor. So I find that, I guess that's another physical benefit of this job, is the freedom to work on other things concurrently. As far as the personal benefits, obviously I've gained a wealth of experience and knowledge from just living in another culture, from having this type of job. All of those experiences aside, because that's itself is an entirely different category. The act of being able to teach and being able to pass on knowledge and see like a kid's face light up whenever they've come to understand something is just phenomenal to me. In addition, English in Japan is seen as a ridiculously difficult subject. I've had countless teachers, parents, etc. be like, oh, they're gonna have to learn English. Oh my God, that must be so boring. They must hate it. Your class must be so difficult. But then to see the students, like even some of the students who had that opinion before, like to see that opinion change as they discover like that English can be fun and it can be interesting, to be able to change that opinion and make them excited to learn and motivate them to do self-learning on their own is just a wonderful part of this job. As far as drawbacks go, as any teacher can tell you, one of the main problems is you get sick all the time, especially because I work in elementary schools now. I'm working with small children, so I get sick all the time. You can probably tell by my voice now, I'm getting over a cold as we speak. Another drawback, because I do live halfway across the world from all my friends and family back home, is it has become difficult to keep in touch with people as much as I would like. And some of my friends that I had before, I've sort of lost contact with them, and there's really not much I can do about it. Of course, on the weekends it's easy for me to Skype, with my parents or my friends, and I can use my iPad here at work, and I can IM with my friends in the morning when it's their nighttime. But even then it's not quite the same. And obviously if you get homesick or anything, you can't just hop in your car and drive back home, because it's about $1,000 plane ticket to get back home. And then of course the time for international travel and the like is a little ridiculous. So if you're the sort who's really close to your family, or you're not sure you can leave your friends, this job may be a little difficult. The requirements of this job are actually very, very light. It's actually phenomenally easy to become an ALT. Because you'll be getting either an instructor's visa if you work in actual public schools, or you'll be getting a specialist in humanities visa if you teach in one of the more private, even English conversation schools or some of the private schools. You will need a bachelor's degree in any subject. For example, mine was in web and graphic design, so nothing related to language whatsoever. At least for teaching in Japan, there's actually no requirement that you speak Japanese at all. They may give you a preference if you can speak some, but tons of people come here knowing no Japanese and they make it through just fine. As far as personal traits that would be required to do this job, they do tend to look for someone who is more outgoing and more friendly, though we get a lot of introverts. Actually, I myself am a little bit of an introvert and I still got in. They also place a lot of value, and especially in my interviews, they always stressed your ability to react to situations and to not panic. If you have experience having been abroad before, they do tend to prefer that, as it shows a little bit more of your adaptability. I myself had never been abroad before this experience, so they just asked me a lot of questions about how I would react to different situations to make sure that I was easygoing enough to handle that sort of transition. Because most of these contracts are for a year, they want to make sure that you're not just going to freak out and bail within the first month. I found out about the JET program when I was 13 years old, and I basically decided then that that's what I wanted to do. So yeah, getting to work with the JET program actually was my first choice. As far as location, I actually wanted to go to Nagano Prefecture, was my first choice. But my third choice when I applied was Fukushima Prefecture. And then after I applied, the March 11th disasters happened. And I came to Japan about 3-4 months after those disasters. So obviously they sort of gave the Fukushima placements to anyone who had indicated Fukushima before. And I'm actually not upset that I was given that placement. I feel like I was perfectly safe as an adult in Fukushima Prefecture, taking the necessary precautions and not being stupid. But I got to do a lot of volunteer work. I got to hear a lot of people's stories, and it was a fascinating time to be there. It was a very, very, useful time to be there. I could do a lot of good, and I could do a lot of work and I actually did a lot of translation volunteer work in terms of getting information out there and helping the people tell their stories. So that was absolutely astonishing work to be able to do. So even though that wasn't my first choice, I feel that that's where I wanted to be more than Nagano Prefecture. I would absolutely recommend this job to anyone who is A, interested in teaching, and B, to anyone who just wants the experience of living abroad. For those interested in teaching, I think that, if you're kind of not sure if, maybe you want to teach but you don't really know, this is a good way to get that experience for like a year. And if you still like teaching after your year teaching here in Japan, like this is playing on hard mode difficulty. So if you can handle teaching in a foreign country to people who don't speak your native language and you still like this job, you're probably going to be okay as a teacher. For those who just want the experience living abroad, it doesn't matter if you go, you can pick the country that you're interested in. You can go teach in France, you can go teach in China. I've heard even the UK has programs like this, if you don't want to deal with the language barrier. But I think it is absolutely rewarding to be able to leave like your previous life, even though my previous life wasn't bad, it's not like I was running from anything, but just the experience of getting to see like what kind of person you are when challenged with a completely new system of doing things, a completely different cultural background, and seeing how that shapes and how you react to that as a person, I think is basically, I think everyone should have to go through something like that because it's so educational and you just can't get it staying in your home country. It also lets you see what experiences you want to take back with you if and when you do decide to go back to where you came from, and being able to adapt your life to that. And it gives you a much wider skill set to work with in terms of how you want to approach things in your life. So I absolutely 100% would recommend this job to anyone. That's it as far as the questions I have. If you have any other questions or you just want to talk to me a little bit more about whatever, feel free to email me anytime you want. That's my email, so anytime is okay. If you want to see more of what I do in terms of teaching language or Japanese culture, like I said, I do maintain a YouTube channel, so there's the link down there. It's mostly videos about Japanese language or Japanese culture, so feel free to check that out and see if you find anything interesting there. So hopefully I've encouraged some of you guys to take a look at this job and maybe try it out for yourself. So hopefully I'll see you in the future someday. Bye bye.